Welcome to my channel. Today we'll be looking at safeguarding your organization from cyber attacks with patch management, and I'm going to walk you through a demo as well on how you can implement patch management using Qualys. Alright, so let's dive in. Okay, so our learning objective is going to be what does it mean to patch a vulnerability? Yeah, I know that a lot of people understand what patch is, but I just want to take some time to just explain what a patch is in case somebody is watching and doesn't understand what a patch is, especially as it concerns a vulnerability. And also, I'll be looking at the processes involved in patch management. And lastly, I'm going to demo how you can use the patch management subscription in Qualys to actually run a patch management. Alright, so what does it mean to patch a vulnerability? So a patch is an additional code introduced into existing software to replace its logical flaws. So we can talk about patch if there's no vulnerability, and once a vulnerability has been identified, we tend to start asking ourselves a lot of questions. So if this particular vulnerability, what impact would it have on our organization? What type of risk does it pose to our organization? And then the next question we ask again is there a fix for this particular vulnerability? If there's no fix for this vulnerability, then what are the existing controls we have in place to reduce or mitigate our environment against such vulnerability, pending the time that the vendor might release a patch for that particular vulnerability? Whenever there's a vulnerability, a vendor actually very responsible to identify or to provide a patch for that particular vulnerability. So, for example, Microsoft released patches as regards the vulnerability that pertains to their products on a Tuesday. So they call it Patch Tuesday. And then organizations that those particular vulnerability tend to affect would start looking at how to remediate or patch those particular vulnerabilities. So if you look at the image I have here, you see that I have several patches for several vulnerabilities. Looking at the published dates, the architecture that the patch is the architecture that the patch actually applies to, is this 64-bit or 32-bit, and then the vendor severity level, then the patch status, is it missing, is the patch missing, or is it installed, and all that. So this just gives from a Qualys angle, how Qualys views patches and how they can install patches. And then, so before you can actually go into the actual process of the actual activities of actually deploying your patches, I also want to take some time to speak to the patch management process. Okay, so in managing patches, it's very important that we go through a particular process as regards patching, deploying patches. It's not advisable to just, once a patch is released, you just go and install it in your production environment. There has to be a process in place that helps you ensure that you safely deploy your patches as regards the existing vulnerabilities in your environment. Okay, so I want to quickly walk us through. So the first thing is to identify the vulnerability, which is what we have done. And then the second thing is to analyze the vulnerability based on its impact. And when we're looking at the impact, we also need to understand what exactly, or what is the severity level of that particular vulnerability. So for severity level, we look at it based on critical, high, medium, and then low. Okay, so we look at all of the severity levels of the vulnerabilities, and then another thing we then tend to look at is the risk factor itself. So what risk does it pose? Is the risk high? Is it medium? Or is it low? So we need to profile a job, we have to look at the risk assessment to analyze the severity level based on the risk it would pose to our environment. So the fact that a vulnerability severity level is critical, and by then you tend to analyze it does not mean that it's going to have an high impact in your organization. So you have to pay attention to the risk assessment side. Apart from the severity level of that particular vulnerability, you look at it based on your internal organization. Does this particular vulnerability, does it pose a huge threat to our environment? If it doesn't, then there's no point for you trying to prioritize such type of vulnerability or some types of patches, because it doesn't really have any impact in your environment. Okay, so the next thing we also need to do is that we need to test that patch. So let's assume that, like I said, the severity level of the vulnerability is critical, and then it's going to have the risk that it poses to your environment is very high. All right, so the next thing we need to do is, and we also ascertain that the vendors actually released a patch for that particular vulnerability. So the next thing we need to do is to test that vulnerability. And the reason why we are testing to test the patch is because we want to ensure that business continuity continues. We ensure that our business operation continues. Because you might implement a patch and then it might disrupt your business, okay? And then you need to answer to the management as we get why there was a business disruption, why is it that this patch caused a business disruption, was basic procedures carried out, was there a test and all that. So it's important that you have a test environment, all right, where you implement that particular patch and then you monitor it for probably a few hours, to ensure that it functions properly and doesn't cause any form of disruption to the service. So my advice is, if you have critical devices, definitely you have critical devices in your environment or critical servers, you can actually create a replication of such devices or services in your test lab, and then you can then run those patches in your test lab to validate that it doesn't cause any business disruption, the patches fix the particular vulnerability, and then you are actually fine. Or another thing again is that once you've implemented the patch, it's also important that you also validate that the vulnerability has actually been removed, that the patch actually fixed the vulnerability. So you can actually rerun a scan, just to ensure that that particular patch you implemented has actually fixed that particular vulnerability. And once you've been able to answer those questions, ensure that you've done your due diligence to ensure that you and your due care that you're fine, then the next thing to do is to take those results through your change management process. Okay, so once you go through your change management process, definitely the change management process, you need to first log a change depending on the change management tool you use. So once you log a change, the change management board will provide a date for you to come defend that particular change. And once you're defending the change, you will have to provide more like a um, MOP, or standard of procedure that you want to use to ensure to implement that particular change. So once you have those once you have this method of procedure in place, then you can, based on your method of procedure and based on how you answer the question posed to you by the change advisory board, then it will determine if that change has been approved or denied, because this decision will be based on the risk factor on your procedures by which you explain to the chain management board. So that is why before you go to a chain management board, you should have done your due diligence to ensure that you've crossed all the dots and ensure that everything you're doing is fine. And that's why the isolated test environment is very important, because it helps you to ensure that you validate every possible risk and ensure that there won't be any form of business disruption as it concerns the business as a result of implementing that change. And once that has been approved, and then once the change has been approved for deployment, then as a vulnerability engineer, or whichever your role might be in deployment of your patches, then you also need to also look at continuous monitoring. We need to be able to monitor um, the change that has been implemented. So if per adventure you notice that there was a disruption as a result of the patch that has been installed, another thing is that we need to look at rollback. We need to be able to roll back that particular patch. And being able to roll back that particular patch will at least restore business operations to ensure that at least the business is operating, while we pay attention to understanding why there was an issue with that patch or things like that. So, and one of the beauty that Qualys patch management subscription does is that it actually allows you to create a rollback job. Okay, a rollback job to reverse the particular patch that has been done, so that you can ensure business continuity. All right, so this is actually the five processes that would help you through your project management processes. This could actually be tailored to suit your own environment. How you identify, how you analyze, how you test your vulnerabilities and things like that. This whole process should actually be tailored to your own peculiar environment. Right, so looking at the demo section, before we go into the demo, I also want to describe my infrastructure. So I have two different type of operating system. I have Windows and I have Linux, and the Linux distribution I have installed is where that's Linux Server 8, and then I've installed Agent on all of those servers so that they can send the vulnerability data to Qualys Cloud. Alright, so with much further ado, let's dive into the lab session itself. Okay, so welcome to the demo section, and this happened to be my dashboard on patch management. So I've actually run a couple of jobs, and that's why you have these details on the dashboard. So let me just quickly walk you through all of the tabs, then I will take you through where to start from, and then we'll take it up from there. So for prioritize product, what that means is that it's going to prioritize the patches based on the vulnerabilities found on the application installed on all of your cloud agents. So for Windows here, we have 1140 type of vulnerability based on the app family. So this categorizes the products based on the vulnerability that exists in each of the applications running on the cloud host agent. And this will also help to prioritize patching based on the vulnerability identified with those applications. The next thing is the patch itself. So these are all of the patches we have. So these patches have actually been filtered. These are the patches based on the operating system. So it's categorized in Windows and Linux. So this is for Linux and this is for Windows. So for Windows, it has actually been filtered. So it's filters based on missing patches, based on only filter based on latest patch. So let me just remove all of that so you can see all of the patches available Qualys Patch Management. So another thing I also want to point your attention to is this particular key. So this means that this particular patch will have to be acquired from the vendor. So you can install or you can add this particular patch to a job or a deployment job. You will have to go download it directly into the host machine you're trying to install it on as you get started. And also for Linux, these are all of the, let me just remove the filters as well. So these are all of the patches available for Linux based operating system based on the cloud agents that I have. So this speaks to all of the Linux based operating system patches available in Qualys. And then for assets, so this would indicate all of the assets we have that we want to Windows based assets based on our cloud agent that we've installed, and also for Linux. So this is for Linux itself. There's already actually so this is what I have for Linux. So this is my cloud agent. I have my cloud agent installed on this server machine itself. So this is what I have for Windows, and this is what I have for, let me go back to it, for Linux based operating system. And then for jobs, this is where you can actually create a job. You can create two types of job. You can create a deployment job and then a rollback job. We're going to get into that. Also, we can also filter job based on the job I own and the job that are cohorted by other users. And this is the configuration tab. This is where you actually configure your profiles for running patches, for scanning for patches. Also, this provides us with the number of licenses that we actually have deployed. So on the licensing space, so for you to have patch management installed, you actually need to get the patch management license from Qualys for you to be able to use that. For the fact that you have patch management as part of your configuration profile does not mean that you'll be able to actually deploy patches on those cloud agents. So you actually need this patch management license from Qualys for you to be able to perform patch management itself. So this is the total. So because the trial version provides you with 30 free licenses that you can actually use for 30 days. After that, you definitely have to pay for it, and then you can select the assets you want to participate in patch management based on tags. Okay, so that's pretty much that as we get that. So for you to be able to do that, so the first thing we need to do is to go to our cloud agent, and then in my previous video, I've done videos on how you can actually install Qualys agent and all that. So you can actually feel free to go back to those videos, and then you can understand how I installed cloud agent. So this is the activation key, and then the activation key, like I said, let me just click on edit so that we can see the licensing that the activation key provides. So this is the activation key I'm using for all of my cloud agents, and these are all of the applications that is provisioned with this activation key. So for any particular agent or cloud agent to participate in, at least for us to be able to know which patches have been installed and not installed, we need to enable this patch management. And once this patch management is enabled, what it allows us to do is that it actually provides us with details as we get patches that are missing and patches that have been installed. And then on the configuration profile space, looking at the patch management module here, is that so Qualys provide every agent will have like a memory for you to install your patches. So this is a pretty much 10 gigabyte space provision to catch your patches that will be installed on the machine itself. So this is just, I just wanted to bring this to your attention so that you know what this patch management module actually speaks to in the configuration profile. Okay, so now let's look at our agents, and then we'll see. So let me use this as an example to show you what patch management modules is saying as regards that particular agent. So what this tells us is that we have 0 missing patches, and then we have 4 installed patches. So this installed patches was done based on Windows update. So once you update your machine, it installs some of the patches on the machine itself. So it shows me 0 missing patches, and it shows me 4 patches based on the scan, on the scheduled scan that has been done. So you can actually run a scheduled scan to scan for patches. So it will tell you, so that scan will indicate the patches that has been installed and the patches that are actually missing. Okay, so let's go back to our patch management, and then I can take you through all of the tabs mentioned. So assuming that you've installed your Qualys Cloud Agent on all of your assets, and then once you've done that successfully, the next thing to do is to come to the configuration aspect. Now, in this configuration aspect, one of the things you need to first do is that Qualys provides you with the default system profile, and that profile provides you with the total number of assets that you want involved, and you can actually add one asset that you can actually add to it. So this is the default, and then you can actually create yours. You can actually create your own profile based on your environment. So let's say this is my demo profile, and then also it's also important that you categorize your profile based on your operating system. So for me, I'm using Windows, so you might also create another profile separately for your Linux, separately for your database machines. It depends on the environment, so you will have to be the one to decide. But it's also good that you categorize your profile creation for separate assets in your environment. Then the next thing to do is to add assets. And then if you want to add assets, you can add asset based on asset groups. You have to add asset based on tags. And then you have to select your tags. So I have actually created my tags. So these are my tags. These are the tags I created for specific operating systems. So because it's for Windows, I can use my Windows server, and then I can use my Windows machine. Okay, and then I can add those tags. Or pretty much, let me just quickly show you how you can also create a new tag based on exactly what you want to do. So let's call this a test tag, for example, just to show you how you can create your own tags, and then you can use it to perform any functionality. So this is asset criticality for the tags. You can say you want to make it a criticality of 4, for example, and then you can select a color for that particular tag. And then let's say we want to create a dynamic type of tag. So for dynamic tag, you have to select a role. So let's use asset inventory, for example, and then you can use operating system. So let's say operating system. So if we're using operating system, we can say we want to use Microsoft, for example. Microsoft as a tag. Um, so it will run through using the Microsoft, and then we can elevate on creation, and then I want to actually test that particular dynamic tag. So let me use a Windows machine. So let me use select, and then let's test. You see it passed because it was able to find an operating system that's Microsoft. And then you can evaluate role on creation, and then you create a role. So now I've created another role, another tag, so I can select that tag here, and then I add it to it. So I've added that. So let me just take it out because I just wanted to show you how you can actually create tags that you can actually use. And next, so the next thing is scan intervals. So so the default scan interval for unlicensed asset is 24 hours, but because this is a trial version, the minimum is every 4 hours, so you can't go beyond 4 hours. So every 4 hours it scans the cloud agents assets that you've installed, and then it verifies which um, of those agents have installed and missing patches. So let's just leave it at 4 hours, and then you can save. So depending on your environment, you can actually use multiple profiles based on your environment. So also, once you create it, you have to enable it. It is disabled by default. Then you click on this action, then you enable. So it's going to enable that particular, yeah, because it's showing me conflict because I have others. So let me just delete this so that I know that I'm just dedicated, focused on just one, and then we can test. Okay, so let me just create another one for my Linux environment. So we know that we have it in two different operating systems. Next, select my operating system that has to do with a Linux, Unix. I select this, I add my tags. Next, I schedule 4 hours, and then I save. So it's disabled by default, then I need to enable it. Enable, and then we are good to go. Okay, so we've created our configuration profile. So the next thing we need to do is to go to patches themselves. So these are all of the patches we have as we get all of the operating system based on all of the vulnerabilities and all that we have. So there are two ways we can actually start creating a job to deploy our the patches. So once you go click on jobs, we don't have any job, so you can actually create a job, and then we want to create a deployment job. So we say create deployment job. So we say Windows update, for example. Okay, and then we can put any description we want, and then we need to select the asset. So there are two ways you can select assets. You can select based on the asset themselves, or you can select them based on tags. So let's use tags since we want to select based on tags. So let's use, so let me use for my client Windows client machine, for example, and then I add the tag. Let me go back and just call it Windows update for client, so that we can be more specific. Okay, so we've selected the asset tags for the particular asset we're looking at. If we want to go directly and select the asset, you can actually select based on, so this is the asset itself that I chose. So you can either use assets, or you can use the asset name itself, or then you can use tags. I would recommend you go through tags because if you have to select assets, you have to select them numerically one after the other. But if you use the tag, it's just going to put all of the assets based on the operating system in that particular tag, and then you're good to go. And then if you want to exclude some specific tags, you can select them. But since you're not using that, you can actually just focus on the tag you want to apply, that what you want included in the patch management job, in the deployment job. So the next thing is that, so depending on the type of patch you want to implement, some patches might require that you run some scripts, or you do before you actually select the patches you want to install. So depending on the requirement, you can actually select some pre-action based on the patch you want to implement. So what kind of action do you want to run before you install the patch itself. Let's say you want to run a script, then you name the action name for the script, and then the custom script you want to implement. Okay, and then you can actually also select software. If you want to install a particular software, you can input the action name, and for you to do that, so there's a bypass for you to install shell. Because you're installing a particular software, you will need to enable it, so it has been disabled. And to enable it, we have to go to, excuse me 1 second. To do that, I'm going to show you, let me just complete this and then I'll show you how you can bypass that. So if you want to run a script, or you want to change the registry, or you need to uninstall a particular software, so you just have to fill in these particular parameters for each of the pre-actions you want to go through before you install the patch itself. So let's select next. We're not doing any of that. So these are three methods you can actually select patches. You can actually do a manual patch selector, or you can actually use automated patch selection, or then you can patch selection from another job. So let me just show you each of the three, and then we can see, just for you to see how it works. So take me to a patch selector. So here you have to actually search for the patches, and then you have to choose the patch that you actually want to implement. So these are the patches within scope. You can say all. So this will provide you with all of the patches. So the reason why it's within scope is because of the operating system, the tag we've selected. So it has actually helped us to minimize the number of patches we should select. So you can just select based on whichever one you want to select. So let me do Wireshark, and then let me just do Wireshark, for example. Yeah, so let me just select Wireshark, and then what you need to do is add to job. You select add to job, and then you can close. So the job has already been added to the patches that we want to deploy. So let me take that out, and let me go do automated patches. So if I want to do automated patch, I need to use the Qualys query languages to do that. So let's say that the patches I want to select is security oriented type of patch. It means that patch would fix specific vulnerability. So if I do is security, this would say, if I say true, this would actually look at all of the jobs, and then to automatically add those jobs for me. So if I do next, let me go back. It's supposed to show me the patches themselves. Okay, so let's just leave it at that, and then let me do select. And this is for the post, meaning that these are the activity I want to select based on, after I install my patch, what activity do I want to go through. So do I want to run the script, install the software? All of these activities are post actions that I want to do after the patch has been installed. And then I can actually schedule the scan. I can schedule the scan. Let's say, for example, we've gone to change management, and it said, oh, we can install it let's say Monday, and we want to do it Monday, let's say 4 a.m. for example, or we want to make it a recurring job. And then we can select the time zone that we want. Depending on the time zone of our environment, we can just select the time zone, and then we can select the patch window itself, when the patch would only be done, the specific time the patch window will be done. So we can say, let's say we create a maintenance window, let's say 8 hours, just for example. That patch will be done within these 8 hours. If it's not completed within these 8 hours, that patch will stop. Okay, so all of this is based on your change management process. You can then use this to schedule. After you run the test, you can use this to schedule your change. So let me just leave it at on demand, so that we can do it instantly. Then options. So these are all of the other options that you can actually configure based on the type of patch you want to implement. So you can provide the pre-deployment messages. Let's say you want to send out a particular email messages before the deployment. So this is where you can actually add all of those details. When the deployment is in progress, you can also add all of these details, and once the deployment is completed, you can add all of these details. And if peradventure you want to suppress reboot, you don't want it to reboot, you can also do that, and then you can send an email to a particular distribution list, as regards suppressing reboot. So asset reboot is suppressed and users are not prompted for reboot push patch installation, so they don't need to go through that. But if there's a reboot request, meaning that you have to send out a message, this should pop up a message, and then it would notify the user using that machine that your machine will be rebooted at so time based on the rebuild requests, based on the part that has been done. And also you can also add a countdown to it and say there should be a countdown of 15 minutes and all that, based on once the patch has been installed for the machine to rebuild. And then you can also send notification by email. Another thing again to do is that you can minimize the job progress window. So all the end users can actually, you can allow them to minimize it. Once you toggle it on, then they'll be able to minimize it. And also there's a something we call opportunistic patch download. So what it means is that the agent will attempt to download the patches before the scheduled job runs. So it will just download the patch and then wait for the time that you've scheduled to run the job, and then next. So if for example you want to have a co-author, I mean somebody else can actually edit the job you've created for the patch. So this is where you select the users. I'm just the only user here, and then you can actually select multiple users and all that. So once you click on next, you can then confirm your configurations. Based on what you've done, you can just look at it to deploy your job, and then you can, it's better you click save and enable, because if you save you still have to enable. So you can save and enable the patches, and then it has been enabled. So we just need to give it some time for it to be able to complete the patch process, because it needs to download the patch process, send it to the cloud agent. The cloud agent downloads it, and then he installs it on the machine, and that's how it works. So once we've completed that job, then we go to the assets, and then we can look at it based on the job that we've already scanned. So here, so this also shows us the scan that has been done. We said that it scans every 4 hours to identify the patches that are missing and those that are installed. So it shows us that we've scanned. I've already done the scanning based on every 4 hours, and then it shows you the patches that are missing and patches that have already been installed. So you can also use this information to guide how to know the patches that you should install and whatnot not. Okay, so in the patches section, this just shows us all of the patches, and then so let's go back to the jobs, and then let's see what's going on. So it has moved now to the prepare stage. So what that means is that we have 7 patches and then 1 asset, because I only used one particular asset. And then it's actually now in the prepare stage. So in the prepare stage means that the job definition is now available for the agent to download. So we have to just wait for a while before the agents communicate, before the patch management is being installed on the agent, and then we'd see how many patches was installed, how many failed, and things like that. So let me go back to my machine itself. So this is the machine itself that we're relating with, and because it's paused, that's why it's still taking some time. So I need to ensure that the machine itself is active, and then it will download the patch, and then we can install the patch. Will be installed, and then to show us, if you want to rebuild and things like that, then we'll see the successes of the patches, if it was successful or not. So we just need to give it some time. Okay, so let me just log in, and the status on the job will definitely change because the machine is actually active. So the status will change. So it's still prepared. Let me just refresh, and then we see the status is still in prepared. So we just need to give it some time, and afterwards the status will definitely change. So another thing again is that once the job is running, you can also view the job progress. You can click on the checkbox, and then you click view progress. So this will show us the progress. So it's showing that the job has been received, and then the job is downloaded by the agent and executed at the scheduled time. So we just need to give it some time, and then we should have our job installed on the cloud agent, on the cloud machine themselves, on the machine itself. So in the prepared status, what you just need to do is to check this, and then you can click on view progress. So once you view progress, so it shows that it's actually downloading on the cloud machine. So before it had to go through different phases. So in this phase, it's just downloading progress, and then we're going to confirm again with, so it's not yet installed on the machine. So we just have to I'm just going to pause the video, and once it's completed, and then we'll proceed. Alright, so the job is completed, and then we can view the ones that was installed and those that actually failed. So let's view all of the jobs. Alright, so these were the successful patches that were installed, and then let's check out the failed. So these are the tools that were failed. So these were because they were previous versions, so that's why they failed, and these were the ones that were successful. If you look at the version correlation, you see this is 3.6.10 and this is 3.0.14. These are old versions. So this is pretty much how you can actually install patches on your cloud agents using Qualys. So let's just go to the dashboard, and then we can just view what has been done. So alright, so looking at the security oriented patches, so let's check for Windows Defender patch, and then let's see the resolved vulnerabilities. So it resolved Microsoft Office Service and Web Application Security for 2021. So it also shows the affected platform, and then there are no superseded patches. It didn't supersede any patches. So these are the patches that were superseded. So you supersede every of these. These are the other versions that were actually superseded by the patch that was installed, and then these are the affected assets. And so that's pretty much it as regards patch management. Please let me know if you enjoyed this video, and thank you for viewing for this long. Have a nice day.